Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was adopted by Inoichi. Inoichi's decision to adopt the boy was a spur-of-the-moment thing, but he stood by it, and he could not be prouder of both his children, even if they lived to give him gray hair. Or, how a Yamanaka-trained Naruto went and cheerfully dismantled the last shreds of Sasuke's self-image, because conventional therapy obviously wasn't working well enough, and then proved that even the best minds could be entirely dumb when it came to romance. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 13, Team Assignments. To be honest, Kurenai-sensei said after they all sat down around the table at the restaurant and gave their orders to the waitress, this year's team assignments were in question until the very last moment. The jounin left a dramatic pause there, clearly intending to continue, but when no further elaboration ensued, Shino surveyed his teammates. Hinata-san was, as he had somewhat expected, struck by anxiety. Shino was surprised and glad to be co-assigned with her. She would be a skilled and reliable ally, and he somewhat knew her. Likewise, he dared hope that she felt similarly about him. Inuzuka-san was not quite a disappointment, in that Shino did not doubt the boy's qualities, but perhaps a challenge, in that their personalities were predisposed to engender conflict. Presently, Inuzuka-san's eyes were glued to the hemline of Kurenai-sensei's dress, and he seemed otherwise utterly insensate. Shino suppressed a sigh and turned to the jounin. Why? Because for the first time in the history of the academy, the rookie of the year was a girl. It nearly came to a fistfight. Kurenai-sensei smiled. Fortunately, the rookie was Yamanaka-chan, so her prior team assignment took precedence, so Hokage-sama simply considered the rest of the class minus the Ino-Shikacho trio. Ino-chan was the best in the year? Hinata-san whispered, breathless. Odd. Shino could admit to a certain amount of surprise. Everybody knew that Uchiha-san would be the rookie. That's right, Kurenai-sensei confirmed and shrugged, still smiling. Inuzuka-san, as a quick glance confirmed, was still speechless. Presently salivating. And, as it seems, several of your classmates have decided to throw the exam, so it happens that the second in the year is Shino Koendashi. Shino felt his eyes widen. This was a very improbable result, given that he had intentionally geared his results toward the average for years. The second best kunoichi is Hinata-chan dash. That Shino could see happening. Haruno-san would have been a competition for the spot, but given Hinata-san's skills, the ranking was deserved. And the second to last was Kiba-koen. Inuzuka-san seemed to awaken with a jerk. What? Sorry, I drifted off for a bit, sensei? His dog barked derisively. Inuzuka-san's face turned progressively redder as he listened to the Ninken's rendition of the events. They all threw it, Hinata-san said plaintively. All of them but Ino-chan. And Shino-kun did too. Ladybug, Shino implored. He briefly lowered his head in confirmation and a mute request for amnesty. He had never been interested in the appearance of excellence. The fact that his peers, led, presumably, by Yoshi-san, had managed to negate his efforts was galling. So, concluded Kurenai-sensei, folding her forearms on the table, it looks like your class is stranger than the wartime years. Congratulations. How about you start with giving me honest appraisals of your abilities? Let's start with Ino-chan, said Asuma-sensei. Ino pulled her shoulders back to display what little chest padding she had managed to grow yet. Yamanaka Ino, which you already know, sensei, and can I just say this is redundant? I knew these guys since before they were toilet trained. Chuji whined on the edge of audibility. Look, Ino-chan, said the jounin, I gave you a really simple order. If you can't follow that dash. I like my clan and my clan techniques. I dislike stupid council decisions that result in stupid team assignments. My hobby is mindfucking dash. Asuma-sensei nearly choked on his cigarette. He pulled it out of his mouth and dragged his hand over his face. Ino smugly relaxed her shoulders. And I'm going to be a kick-ass kunoichi that's known all over the elemental countries for her beauty and her skill and her mind-fucking mojo. People will tremble in fear just hearing my name. Ho ho ho. She stopped laughing maniacally and reverted to the cute and innocent persona, clasping her hands together in her lap the way Sakura sometimes did. And I wanted to marry Sasuke-kun before my stupid brother went and made him all uninteresting. So I guess I'm waiting for a really cool ninja to walk into my life. Really cool in this context, Shikamaru suspected, meant really messed up in the head. Ino's tastes in people were particular and not really a secret. How interesting, deadpanned Asuma-sensei. Not 10 minutes with them yet, and he was already obviously regretting taking a team at all. What about you, Shikakun? Shikamaru grumbled. Nara Shikamaru. I don't like troublesome things. I like when things aren't troublesome. Like Go. Or Shogi. Hobbies, sleeping. Cloud watching is nice too. And your dream? Asuma-sensei inquired fatalistically. A dream, huh? To be allowed to sleep in until noon for the rest of your life? Ino suggested pithily. Asuma-sensei sked. You had your turn, Ino-chan. Let Shikamaru-kun speak for himself. Shikamaru's dream, huh? To have a moderately successful career as a shinobi of Konoha, to take over as clan head for his dad, and then foist off the hassle onto one of his cousins, and to marry the person of his choice, and maybe have a family of their own one day. He shrugged. Nay, Ino's right. Asuma-sensei was beginning to look depressed. And you, Chokuin? I am a Kimichi Chuji, Chuji said, looking several times between Ino and Shikamaru, probably deciding which one he was going to emulate and whether he was going to self-censor too. I like my friends. And, yeah, food. I dislike people that call me fat, and people who give up on their friends. Shikamaru accepted that dig as his due. Even though he had partially remedied that situation from Chuji's point of view, and made fairly good progress from his own. My hobbies are training and hanging out with my friends, and my dream is to master the Akimichi techniques, and be a dependable teammate. Their sensei looked at Chuji like he was a gift from the gods. At least they had a smart sensei that could see the value of what was right in front of him. Oh, thank you, that was a great introduction, Chuji-kun. Now, let's talk about the real test you have to pass to become Genin Dash. Let us start with introductions, said the Jounin. Why? Because Dash. Or we can spare ourselves this whole farce, Keiko bit out. She couldn't help it. She was just so angry about this setup. If they wanted her to fail out, why did they string her along until the very bitter end? She could have been learning something useful for 2 or 3 years now. Please, said the Jounin, like it didn't bother him that she cut him off, clarify. Ami-chan pulled a handkerchief out of her bag and blew her nose. She tried to keep it quiet, but failed. Fuyumi-chan patted her back. This situation had made them friends, even though they did not know her well. She was very quiet. So, it was up to Keiko to stand up and raise the stink in all their names. So, she did. She stood tall, taller than their sitting fake would-be teacher, and put her arms akimbo like she had watched Ino-chan do for years whenever she felt the need to confront an authority figure. You think we're stupid? The Jounin's face didn't move at all, at least not the part of it they could see around the sunglasses. No, I do not dash. 'Cause there's never been a girls-only team. Keiko snapped. Never. I looked it up. Boys only? Sure. But girls only? You could have just told us we weren't good enough and spared us this. Game of make-believe, Fuyumi-chan helped her, glaring over Ami-chan's hunched shoulders. It's just plain cruel. Ah, said the Jounin. There was silence while Keiko stewed and Ami-chan sobbed into her knees, devastated by the humiliation. Then the Jounin rose to his feet. He wasn't the tallest man around, but he was still pretty tall. And creepy. The way you couldn't tell where he was looking was just ugh. He was worse than Shino. Shino at least made a semblance of a facial expression once in a while. "You are mistaken in your assumption," said the man. "Why?" "Because I intended to give your team a fair trial. However, if you are determined to fail, it is acceptable dash." "Wait." Fuyumi-chan yelped. "You mean that? You'd be willing to actually lead a kunoichi-only team?" "Willing? Willing?" repeated the Jounin. He might have, perhaps, tilted his head a little, but it was hard to tell. "I would be honored, provided that it was a team worth leading. However, I am reserving judgment regarding this team's worth until after the trial." I am Haraguchi Ami," gasped Ami-chan, knuckling away her tears. "I like my friends in Sasuke-kun and Suzume-sensei's lessons. My dream is, I want to be a demolitions expert, a real kunoichi, not like Mizuki said." Keiko watched the Jounin. She still didn't believe that this wasn't a cruel hoax, but apparently the only way to disprove it was to give it a chance. She would. For Ami-chan's sake. And Fuyumi-chan's. If they failed, they would know it was because they never had a chance, not because of any lack of merit. They would make damn sure of that. Kakashi opened the door to the classroom. 3 faces looked up at him with varying levels of annoyance and intrigue. The pink-haired girl rose to her feet immediately and bowed. The dark-haired boy didn't move. And the blonde was Minato-sensei's son. Kakashi blinked and took a closer look. The features didn't match. The eyes, yes, they were right, but the hair was the wrong color dyed, obviously, and where were the whiskers? Minato-sensei's son, he repeated to himself, incredulous. It had been years since he had dared hope. He had been absolutely, 100% certain that the Sandaime had let Danzo take the boy and brainwash him into one of those special ANBU, and then lose him on some off-the-books mission, even though there was no evidence to support it. Only here was a smiling, that familiar, heart-stabbing smile, wrong blonde Yamanaka boy, and the sudden relief that welled inside Kakashi made both his eyes well. "My first impression of you," he drawled, "is that I'm going to enjoy making you regret all your life choices." And then he was going to do the same to the Sandaime. Sitting down on the roof of the academy like a proper team offset the first impression a little bit, but Kakashi-sensei immediately remedied this by offering a pathetic non-introduction. Naruto, as a ninja training to be a specialist on dissemination, took offense. And he was going to express said offense by demonstrating how to do it right. "Ooh, can I start, sensei?" "Please let me start. I want to talk about myself. My name is Yamanaka Yoshi." He punched the air. "I like hot chocolate with marshmallows. Really like it. I mean, I know I shouldn't tell you, Dad keeps harping on about it, but I can't sleep if I don't get my chocolate with marshmallows just how I like it." Sasuke stared into the distance, a little less absent than he had been a while ago, and a whole lot more long-suffering. "Oh yeah? Right track, check." Sakura puffed up her cheeks and crossed her arms in front of her chest, tragically wrong in assuming it made her look superior to her silly blonde, the kind of blonde that blonde jokes were made about classmate. "I like zebras," Naruto continued, because at this point it was obviously a challenge. "They're so tall. And so cute. And those ears. Have you ever seen zebra ears? Zebras are not even native to this continent." Sakura snapped. "And you're talking about giraffes." Naruto shrugged. "Doesn't make them any less cute. It just means that I didn't get one for my 10th birthday, even though I really begged. I spent 2 weeks begging Dad. He was really annoyed." "I am really annoyed," hissed Sakura. "You," Sasuke said, before he remembered that he was going to be all aloof and untouchable by earthly concerns such as his new team assignment. "Right path, double check." "Yes, Sasuke-kun." Sakura piped up, with attentiveness so intense it would have been mocking coming from anyone half-sane, and yes, Naruto was aware that this was not a proper term, and that he wasn't qualified to diagnose anyone, but these were his thoughts, and Dad had yet to figure out how to get inside them past the nine-tailed guardian, ha. Are kidding? Sasuke concluded his long and unnecessarily wordy inquiry. Naruto shook his head. Nah. Really broke my heart, but then, Ino-chan begged for a pony for her birthday, and she didn't get one either, so I guess it's fair. We got to ride a couple of the Nara deer though, that one time, and that was really cool. Sasuke must have figured out what Naruto was doing, because he was looking at him with a hint of respect. This, Naruto admitted, was a new and interesting development. Sakura hummed. Her lower lip stuck out. Ma, said Hatake-sensei, I gave you a task, kid. If you can't focus, you're not ready to be a genin. Right. Naruto exclaimed and grinned widely. Likes. I also like it when Dad takes us to a restaurant because dash. Dislikes? Hatake-sensei cut him off. Naruto was glad that he had been grinning, because otherwise he would have grinned now, and that wouldn't have been the correct response. Default grinning to the rescue yet again. Yosh. Oh, crap buckets of them. I guess crap buckets would be one. You ever had to clean out a busted septic tank? I mean there was this one time when I was, like, 8 and dash. You! Yelled Sakura. Sasuke remained silent, once again staring, mellow, dramatically into distance, but there was a hint of disgust on his face too. Naruto's palms itched with the magnetic force that tried to make him rub them together. Hobbies? Prompted Sensei. That one was tricky. Mostly because it was far too easy to verify. Naruto couldn't really get creative with this one. But Sakura created a great stepping stone for him here with the impression of her Sasuke fixation, so he just thought about some of his privately spent time and let the blush imply everything. He said. Because Hatake had been an almost 13-year-old once upon a time, and probably had discovered his dick too, this came through clearly. Sasuke didn't catch it though, and that was honestly a little worrying. Naruto very much didn't want to have to be the one to clue him in. Sakura naturally misunderstood and then promptly took it personally, but that was expected. You dash. Nah, don't be like that, Sakura-chan. I didn't even get to talk about my dreams yet. He leered. Not dreams as in what you see when you sleep, the Jounin said with the kind of patience that suggested he was imagining doing very painful and potentially fatal things to Naruto's body. Dreams as in your aspirations for the future. Now this was a tricky one. The trickiest part of it was that Naruto honestly did not know. I want to be a shrink. That was true enough without giving away anything too private. Kakashi-sensei seemed relieved by the brevity, but made a show of checking his watch anyway. Oh, look at the time. Maybe we should wait until tomorrow before we continue with introductions, if we don't want to be stuck here past midnight. Sasuke turned away from the fascinating horizon and, with his customary unimpressed by your shit expression, informed the Jounin. That might have worked, if you hadn't personally stolen 4 hours of my life today. Yoshi's right. Naruto had to fight very hard not to smile. Yes, Sakura agreed demurely, although whether with Naruto or with Sasuke was anyone's guess. I am sorry, sensei, but she pressed her hands together in her lap. We have been waiting for you for a really long time. A really long time. Kid, the Jounin said dryly, if you think 4 hours is a long time to wait, you have no business being a ninja. Naruto guessed that the man was losing interest in the game, and at any moment now the semblance of joviality would be gone. He touched Sasuke's elbow and mouthed go. Uchiha Sasuke. I don't like anything, and I dislike a bunch of things, fan clubs, for a random example. And people who switch personalities like underwear. Naruto took this as a compliment, but for some reason Sakura went pink to match her hair. I train. It is not a hobby, but it is probably the closest thing. I don't have dreams. My ambitions are seeing the bastard that murdered my family dead and taking revenge by living well. Happy? Ecstatic, replied the Jounin. Compliments to your coach. I shall convey them, retorted Sasuke. Sakura, get this over with fast so we can move on. Yes, Sasuke-kun. She spoke to her knees, my name is Haruno Sakura. I like my friend Ino and Yoshi-kun and, I like Sasuke-kun a lot too. I dislike rude people. Her glance up at the jounin and back down was so quick that Naruto nearly missed it. My hobbies are reading and learning. My dream is to, find something to be really good at, and, this time the lightning-fast glance was directed at Sasuke. Deserve the love of someone I admire. Love is not deserved, Sakura-chan, Naruto said, smiling at her. Love is given freely. But if you want, we'll help you get strong, so you can catch the eye of anybody you like. Sakura smiled back at him. And behind all that hair, she was really pretty. Your actual Genin test is tomorrow, snapped Kakashi-sensei, standing up. Training ground 3, 5 o'clock dash, and he rattled off a set of instructions before disappearing into thin air. The three apparently not yet Genin stared at the empty space with a trio of nearly identical "are you kidding" expressions. Then Naruto finally exhaled, inhaled, and used that air to inquire, what lit a fire under his arse? I fucking hate you, Kakashi said wetly. Hiruzen did him the courtesy of not replying "you're welcome" out loud. Chapter 14, Crossed Wires. Chapter text. What is this? Demanded Inoichi. Hatake looked from the gift basket he had just deposited on top of Inoichi's counter, in between the display of cacti and the stack of orders Inoichi was about to fill and send out, to Inoichi and shrugged one shoulder, like he didn't understand the question. Inoichi momentarily missed the days when he could order Hatake around. This was, he was sure, revenge. But he maintained that sending the suicidal young Anbu to therapy had been the right choice, even though both sides of the resulting psychological war had hated him afterwards. At least so he assumed from the fact that the psych guys had stopped inviting him to the poker tournament. He missed that too. Nobody played poker like psych-trained ninja. Speaking of, he should teach his kids. They could make family nights of Inoichi fleecing them for D-rank's pay. Any particular reason why you're delivering gift baskets now, Hatake-san? I thought D-ranks were for Genin Dash. Not delivering, Hatake cut in. It's from me. Oh. Well, that explained a lot. A shiver came down Inoichi's spine as it occurred to him that with the precarious mental state of this shinobi, his reaction might well have swung to the other side of the emotional spectrum, and Inoichi might have woken up short a few organs today. He should have known that even with all those precautions he took, Hatake would recognize his teacher's son. That's nice of you, he said blandly, trying to suppress the urge to kill in the name of his child's personal security. Hatake kept standing there, like he was still expecting something. Well, Inoichi was not going to thank him, and he was not going to apologize, and he absolutely was not going to explain himself, even though the intense one-eyed stare was making him very uncomfortable. He preferred Hatake behind a porcelain mask. Finally, without any particular impulse to trigger it, Hatake smiled so widely that his visible eye narrowed to a slit. It's good that Sasuke-kun came to me with an inbuilt psychiatrist. If anybody needs it, it's that kid. Of course, he wasn't going to mention himself. Good job, Inoichi-san. A moment later all that was left of Hatake was a huge, ridiculous gift basket and a handful of leaves on the shop's floor. Kakashi had wanted to be very angry and hurt, but in the end, it came down to a simple mental exercise. If not for Yamanaka Inoichi's actions, Minato-sensei's son would have been alone, hated, probably bullied, and there for Kakashi to watch over. This way the boy was content in the midst of what seemed after some observation to be a good family, confident, accepted by his peers, skilled in his adopted clan's techniques and just happy. Kakashi had spent the past 8 years in despair, and it had driven him to several unconscionable, if retroactively sanctioned, actions. But maybe that was his purgatory? Maybe that despair helped wash off some of his guilt. You might as well come in, said the voice from the room in front of which Kakashi had stopped to reflect upon his life. He did as bidden, and then enjoyed watching his Chunan's eyes widen as he identified his visitor. Hatake-san. Don't do that. It's Kakashi. The young man, definitely no longer a teenager and, dear Inari, did he wear adulthood well now that he wasn't injured, capped his pen, set it on top of a pile of paper, and leaned back against his desk. You are an academy teacher, Kakashi pointed out. It was supposed to be a conversation starter, but sadly, it came across sounding somewhat stupid here in the teacher's office at the academy. Correct, said Irika-sensei, with no small amount of sarcasm. Kakashi catalogued the existence of a heretofore unknown kink, and moved on to the reason for his visit. So, you know Yamanaka Yoshi? I taught him, admitted Irika. Or, it would be more accurate to say, I had him in my class. I can't even guess if he learned anything from me personally. All Kakashi remembered of the academy was an embarrassingly easy kiddie test that he had ripped through, and that time when his father had brought him along to pick up his Hitaiate, so in his very subjective opinion it was probably standard for most clan children to perceive academy teachers as prison wardens at best. Tell me about him, Kakashi asked, or, now that he had hurt himself, he might have unintentionally ordered that, and what did people do in these situations? Please? He tried with just a tinge of exasperation directed at his complete lack of people skills. He had not needed any for 10+ years, and he was now keenly feeling the lack of practice. I have work to do, replied Kakashi's Chunin, cool like the land of snow, but on the positive side at least he did not get offended by Kakashi's tendency to subconsciously divide people into superiors, subordinates, and unimportant extras. Kakashi would have to keep a better check on that. So, the sensei added, I'll give you a more detailed report if you pass him, don't make that face. It's not a bribe. I just don't have so much time I'd wasted on your idle curiosity. If that information would be useful to you in the future, then that's different. Kakashi had to admit that it made sense. He couldn't explain about Minato-sensei and lost legacies and the weird buoyant feeling in his chest whenever he looked at the grinning Yamanaka boy. The Jounin Hitaki Kakashi had no conceivable savory reason to ask after Yamanaka Inoichi's adopted son. I'll be by, Kakashi assured his Chunin, and hoped that the children were better than the usual detritus he got to gleefully dismiss. The teacher waited until Kakashi was out of the office before he stood, crossed the room to the door and said, I get hungry this late in the afternoon. The door slammed shut. Kakashi sardonically saluted it, while most of his insides went mine. In cacophonous unison. Ibiki-san? Irika spoke from the threshold of the office. It was nothing like his own child-safe, inviting, time-worn, cheap office, but it was still warm, and there was a framed photo on Ibiki-san's desk. The family in it was large. Irika knew that Ibiki-san was supporting his elderly, invalid parents, but the man had never mentioned any other surviving relatives. Ibiki-san raised his head from the paperwork, and the tension around his eyes eased somewhat. Irika. Can I help you? I might have an idea regarding Hitaki-san, Irika said, one corner of his mouth rising without permission. If you were asking seriously. Guessing from how the Takuja brightened, he must have been at least semi-serious. Sit down. Talk to me. Irika took a seat on the ratty settee with the washed-out stains and accepted a cup of tar masquerading as coffee with profuse and heartfelt gratitude. It has come to my attention that Hitaki-san is interested in pursuing me. Definitely sexually, but probably also romantically. I could take advantage of his interest. Irika felt so, divorced from himself. He couldn't believe he was suggesting this. It was not as though he needed some kind of excuse to go out with Hitaki-san and do whatever he felt like doing. And still here he was, looking for validation. For sanction. Maybe, if he was instructed to do it, it would feel less like undeserved self-indulgence, and more like a goal he could legitimately pursue. Ibiki-san watched him with a worried scowl. This doesn't sound like you, Irika-kun. Irika nodded. Of course, it didn't. He made it a point not to sound like himself whenever he could avoid it. Nowadays when he said something too personal, no one ever took him seriously. People laughed the real him off as a joke. It was safer that way. How far are you willing to go for this? For the lives of my students. Irika spread his hands. I'll date him to keep tabs on Team 7. From Kakashi-sensei's scare tactics, telling them the percentage of failure and ridiculous instructions, do not eat breakfast because you will throw up? Really? Naruto figured out that Kakashi-sensei was a mindfuck kind of person. Instant kiss ship. Then Kakashi-sensei arrived 4 hours late and presented them with a mindfuck instead of rules for the test, and Naruto decided that he might as well have fun with this. Sasuke-kun? He said, hopping from another the tree to Sasuke's perch. What? Sasuke scowled, but after a moment he seemed to get an idea. There's 2 of us and 2 bells dash. And a mindfuck of a test, Naruto pointed out. He wasn't sure if Sasuke was up to understanding how much of everything was a lie, and that it was Sasuke's own responsibility to decide what was real and how much suspension of disbelief was prudent at any given moment. This might have been Hatake Kakashi's strategy for dismissing them, but Naruto didn't think so, what with the strained clan politics it would result in. But if this was a legitimate genin test, it was probably testing for something completely different than what the instructions mentioned. Never mind though. He used his skills to accomplish his given mission as best as he could. Only it was hard to explain that sort of thing to someone who wasn't trained to think that way. What's our objective? Sasuke's scowl deepened at being questioned like a child, but he had known Naruto for a while now, and he knew how likely Naruto was to take silence for an answer, so he did grumble, getting a bell. Wrong, Naruto assured him. Sasuke scowled some more. Our objective is for Team 7 to be accepted by a Jounin sensei. We're on a time limit, Yamanaka, growled Uchiha-kun. I don't have time for your philosophy dash. You don't even know what you're supposed to be doing, but you're going to do something just to be seen doing anything? Naruto asked, instead of saying oh dear Izanagi, I thought I broke you off of running blindly toward the red flag you bull-headed moron, which he thought. I'm supposed to get a bell. Sasuke snapped. Naruto, thankfully, had a lot of practice with talking to this talking upright log, or he would have started hitting his head on the tree trunk any moment now. Just like you were supposed not to eat breakfast? Just like you were supposed to be here at 5 in the morning? Just like you were supposed to hate everybody and then hunt down your brother alone? This, at least, gave Avenger-kun a pause. He reconfigured himself on the bough and sat so that he could converse without twisting his neck. I thought that was a simulation of field conditions. Then he'd have ordered us instead of recommending or, more likely, isolated us for the night so that we could not cheat. Sasuke nodded. Naruto took a deep breath like an inverse sigh of relief. Let's start from the beginning. Our objective is for Team 7 to be accepted by a Jounin sensei, Sasuke parroted, rolling his eyes. But he must have found merit in the discussion, or he wouldn't have played along. To do that Team 7 needs to pass the test, Sasuke filled in, but the scowl was back, and he seemed distracted. Which is? Naruto held his breath and crossed his fingers. Sasuke blinked. Impossible. Naruto grinned. He couldn't help it. He was proud of himself and of Sasuke both. Let's go get Sakura. Kakashi had in the past tested several cast-off teams. None of them were expected to pass, and none of them did, but those experiences gave him a basic template of what he could expect to happen with 3 academy children. It wasn't happening. Not a single one came at him to try their solitary, doomed luck. He watched as one of the boys hunted down the other. They talked, and at this point Kakashi fully expected that they would agree to work together and throw their female teammate, statistically weaker, and automatically the outsider based on her gender, under the bus. His shadow clone popped and its accumulated memory flooded his mind. The clone had put the girl under a genjutsu, and she snapped? Too bad the clone wasn't using the Sharingan, because having that memory clear would have been extremely helpful. Regardless of what exactly had happened, the girl went from falling onto her, but to stabbing a kunai through the clone's foot and following with a stab upwards toward the groin that, Kakashi thanked his lucky stars, never connected, because at that point the clone had already burst. That was one memory Kakashi was happy to have avoided. And, the boys were gone. Fuck. Kakashi didn't actually have any difficulty tracking them down, but by the time he found them all three of them, since they had picked up the girl on their way, were seated around a table at Anko's favorite dango shop and badmouthing him. "I'll put you down as a fail then," Kakashi said. At another time he would have enjoyed how they all jumped. Right now though, he was just disappointed and worried and, well, a little bemused. He didn't think children that age could actually defeat the test, but he had hoped for them to at least show some potential. Not just give up. "You gave us a suicide mission, you cunt," Sakura screeched. The entire restaurant fell silent and motionless. Kakashi was too busy collecting his jaw from the floor to notice much of their audience, except that some of the other customers were clearly taking the statement for the truth, and killing intent was rising from several directions. "Let's reconvene at the training ground and talk about it," Kakashi said, and then, just in case, added, "That's an order." As he flickered away, he heard the Yamanaka say, "That's what I meant, Sasuke-kun." They let him wait. Of course, they did. Not too long, not so long that Kakashi would have gone and hunted them down again, but long enough that it was obvious they had finished their dango without hurrying. They ambled up the path to the memorial stone, where Kakashi was sitting and pecking at one of the bento that were supposed to be for them. "Sit," he ordered. He wasn't sure what to do now. All his strategies for teaching children were based on keeping his air of superiority, the confidence and skill differential, and intimidating the kids into getting along with everything. It had always worked for ANBU recruits. "Report." They obeyed. Kakashi was honestly surprised, but he understood over the course of the individual reports, first the girls, he was sure they were actually twins, and this was the nice one, then Uchiha's, and finally Minato-sensei's sons. The test was supposed to determine if you were capable of teamwork, Kakashi explained eventually. "You did not pass it. We busted it," Yamanaka muttered subversively. "But you did show off teamwork, and you also showed off that you were a group of insubordinates, unreliable loose cannons." "I was not allowed to use my personal training at the academy," said Yamanaka, like that was an excuse. He grimaced, most likely thinking of some past circumstances that either involved unpleasantness he might have avoided with his expertise, or punishment he received for disobeying those orders. Kakashi hoped it was the former. Inoichi had never struck him as the violent kind of perfectionist, but the sort of proficiency Yoshi showed at a relatively young age was not usually achieved without a motivator as powerful as pain, or perhaps the threat of banishment. He was adopted, after all. "If the point of this charade was to have a legitimate-looking reason to dismiss us, just say so," said Uchiha. "I have things to do." "If you were genuinely testing our teamwork, Hataki-san," added the girl, "then have we not done well? And if the point was humbling us—" "Sorry," concluded Yamanaka. He actually looked like he was sorry, which was probably the loudest warning Kakashi would receive about what he was dealing with. "I will pass you," Kakashi offered, "but there will be ramifications. Usually, Genin teams get a grace period to acclimatize themselves to being on the force. Smaller mess-ups will be overlooked or used as teaching moments." Yamanaka nodded, aware where Kakashi was going with this. Uchiha just continued looking disdainful. "We won't have that," guessed the girl. Kakashi shook his head. "You refuse to play along, fine by me. No more games. If you're insubordinate, I'll write you up." They put their heads together and whispered for a while. Kakashi could have listened in if he had tried, but he wasn't interested enough. Eventually they looked at him and Yamanaka nodded. "Fair enough, Hataki-san." "It's Kakashi-sensei," Kakashi corrected. And whoa. That was a mindfuck. Chapter 15, The Flying Geese Paradigm. "I wasn't abused," Yamanaka, Yoshi said out of blue. Kakashi had dismissed the kids and the other two were since gone. He needed to have a good, long talk with his past teammates, but he couldn't really do that until he was left alone with the memorial stone. And this sparkling new genin wasn't going away like he was supposed to. Yoshi rolled his eyes. Don't even front, sensei, I know what you were thinking. This, Kakashi decided, was getting a little creepy. And even more worrying than it had already been. Yoshi met his eyes, and it was like playing Who Blinks First with Marino Ibiki. Liminally terrifying. Do you? Kakashi inquired absently. I was not abused. I was not threatened with abuse. Or neglect. I never doubted my welcome within the clan. Yoshi might not have been a blood Yamanaka, Kakashi might have only found this out 8 years after Inoichi picked up Naruto, but it still added up to about 5 life debts he owed the Yamanaka by now, which was a whole separate worrisome issue, but he was one by training, and he was great at it. Too great. Suspiciously great. Yoshi grinned. The thing is, sensei, that I just really enjoy fucking with people. As the boy leapt to his feet and ran off in the direction of the village center, Kakashi reconsidered that last statement. The boy even used strategic profanity as an offensive weapon, which made Kakashi wonder if Sakura had said that thing at the dango shop of her own accord, or because Yoshi told her to do it. Oh, he didn't doubt that Yoshi's assertion was true in its general version, but Kakashi understood the core of it now. He knew. He knew enough to pity his future self. Because Yoshi, the Yamanaka-trained Namikaze Uzumaki child, enjoyed fucking with Kakashi specifically. Why didn't you tell me? Yoshi yelled, barreling into Ino's room and then ducking under a barrage of shuriken. What did I tell you about barging in here? Ino yelled back and reached for another handful of sharp weapons. That you'll shave my head in my sleep and tattoo something embarrassing on the back of it, but you refused to tell me what it would be. So that I would have to ask people to tell me and so make it even more embarrassing. Yoshi reported, completely ignoring the real issue. I could have been naked. Ino spat. This seemed to have an effect, finally. Yoshi blanched. Sorry? Please don't make me see you naked dash. Learn to knock and wait for an invitation, dumbass. Do I need to come up and break you apart? Dad yelled from downstairs. Seeing Yoshi's pleading look, Ino rolled her eyes and replied at the top of her lungs, no. He dodged and I'm out of killing intent. They sniggered together at some of the half-heard threats and curses coming from the kitchen. Ino flopped onto her bed and stretched, idly watching as her nail polish changed color depending on how the light hit it. So pretty. What did you even want? Oh right. Sis, why didn't you tell me Sakura's so interesting? Isn't she just? Ino grinned, self-satisfied. She had done some of her best work on Sakura-chan, better even than on Hinata-chan, if she was honest. Only she had never pretended that she had ameliorated Sakura-chan's psychological disorder. She had just helped stabilize it somewhat. The rest was up to Yoshi now. Yoshi was walking up and down the length of Ino's throw rug and wildly gesticulating. She's so crazy. Half the time she's completely out of touch with herself. Does she have actual full split personality, or is that just an extreme case of bipolarity? Which complete cretin even let her graduate? He was grinning excitedly over the course of his rant, so it was obvious that he saw in Sakura exactly the same things Ino did. Do you have a handle on her yet? She asked. She wasn't going to give him hints, of course, but she liked Sakura and wanted to be reassured that her new keeper of functionality could take care of her sufficiently. No, because somebody didn't clue me in advance. I only just figured it out today. And why the hell does she keep the meek half out all the time? Ino shrugged. More practical for the academy. Can you imagine Irika-sensei's reaction if she cheerfully destroyed his classroom with somebody's face? Because Inuzuka did ask for it a few times. Yoshi halted and practically vibrated in place, overflowing with excitement to the point that he didn't know what to do with all the joyous energy. I got a team with 3 head cases on it. It's like an all-you-can-eat buffet. I'm in mindfuck heaven. Because Ino did, after all, grudgingly care for her brother, she did not stick him with anything sharp while she kicked him out of her room. It's not fair. She whined and punched her pillow. Why does he get the cool team? The Hatake that came by Irika's office in the early afternoon today was very different from the one that had come yesterday. He looked as though he had felt someone walk over his grave. He placed a bowl of takeaway ramen on Irika's desk and said, "Have dinner with me." Okay, Irika agreed, smiling down at the rosters for next year's classes. If you're late, Hatake-san, I will never say okay again. It's Kakashi, Hatake corrected, still shell-shocked under the thin veneer of apathy, and left. Irika appreciated the late lunch. He also appreciated a man that could be trained. Team 7? Hiruzen asked, not actually in doubt of what he would hear. Pass, Kakashi-kun replied petulantly. Someone laughed, but the young man ignored them, seemingly intent on his book. It was only the second pass granted in this age group after Team 3. But 2 more were coming and Hiruzen could not squash the self-satisfied smirk. Even though none of this was the direct result of his actions, he was the one sitting in the center of the web. Congratulations, he said. Teammate? Hello, Kakashi-san, Irika said dryly. The elite jounin with excellent situational awareness pretended to be startled out of his literary zone. His one bared eye squinted at the horizon, and he quite overplayed the supposed surprise. Is it that time already? Irika guessed that this was one way how he could be punctual for their rendezvous, while at the same time keeping the illusion that it wasn't intentional. And he did put the book away immediately, dropping the full weight of his attention on Irika. It was about as heavy as an anvil. I heard you like Ichirako's ramen, Kakashi remarked with the nonchalance of an unrepentant stalker by profession, which is fortunate, because I like Ichirako's ramen too. I see you're going all out, Irika noted dryly. He did not mind. In fact, he preferred this to some place where they would be stared at and gossiped about. He did not think ramen for 2 meals a day was survivable in the long run, but just this once should be okay. Kakashi shrugged one shoulder, somehow managing to suggest in that one tiny gesture that he knew all that had just gone through Irika's head. It's just the first date, sensei. Let's eat food we both like, talk about things we have in common, and see where we go from there. Irika could tell exactly where Kakashi wanted to go from there. And was definitely going to make him wait at least until the 3rd date. Just for the principle, not because it would be a hardship. He wouldn't have volunteered for this assignment if he had been repulsed by the jounin. Excellent suggestion. Irika grinned. And we do have things in common. So, how do you like your students? They're still breathing, aren't they? Grumbled the beleaguered newly minted jounin sensei. Irika laughed so hard his belly ached. Mused Yuki, while Inoichi tested the integrity of her knots, and found them to be beyond reproach. I feel like one of these days Hatake will make someone very exhausted, but also very happy to be so exhausted. Inoichi recited the list of deadly plants in Greenhouse 13 inside his mind, and tried not to beg. He only had himself to blame anyway. Why in Izanagi's name had he kept Hatake's gift basket? He should have incinerated it at the first opportunity. There was Ika merchandise and novelties of the sex shop variety in there. Oh merciful Izanagi, Hatake needed so much help, and Inoichi had made the strategic mistake of not destroying them immediately, which resulted in Yuki finding them and subsequently initiating 2 conversations. The first one was very, very uncomfortable. The second one was being rewarding. Poor Hatake, Yuki mused, shaking her head mockingly and caressing Inoichi's vulnerable stomach. He will know exactly what hit him, and it will hurt a lot, and he will be so grateful. Just get off your fat arse and start doing something. Ino cried, so frustrated that she was about to start ripping out her hair. She had not imagined team training like this. It was just the 3rd day, but she was already contemplating poisoning Chuji's chips and smothering Shikamaru with his pillow. This was not training. Lay off Chuji, Ino, grumbled Shikamaru, not even bothering to lift his eyes from the go board. She had not even mocked him when the first thing he did after they were confirmed as Genin was get his ears pierced. She thought they would be a real team now, but no, it was once again Ino against the boys. But instead of Yoshi, whom she had trained to think, the third guy here was Asuma, who had a tobacco-burning stove instead of a brain. Asuma-sensei did look up, but it was anyone's guess how much he could see through the veil of smoke. Hey, lighten up, Kunoichi-chan. You can play the next game dash. I'm going to train. Ino announced. You stay here and just grow fatter and lazier, and don't expect me to carry your corpses home when you die on our first mission. She spun around and strode away. Yoshi was with his own, so much better. Team, but she could beat up a training post or something. She's gonna drive us crazy, I can just tell, Asuma complained behind her back. If only. Maybe then they wouldn't be useless. Or if they still were useless, at least they'd be interesting. Good work, Team 3, said Shibi-sensei. We will proceed to report for our first mission. Keiko couldn't reply, her jaw had to remain clenched to trap the scream that wanted to rip out. Fuyumi-chan was clutching her kodachi in both hands and taking deep, calming breaths through her nose. Ami-chan's breath was hitching, her hands were bundled up in the folds of her tunic, exposing a sliver of a pale, but toned belly. She, at least, managed a feeble, "Why yes, sensei." They were trying not to slap at themselves. The crawling feeling had penetrated Keiko's dreams by now, and guessing from the bags under her friend's eyes, they had similar problems. They itched. All over. It was impossible to tell what were actual bugs and what just phantom sensations, so they couldn't risk scratching. After the first time Ami-chan had reflexively slapped her calf and killed a Kakachu. Well, they did not want to risk a repeat of that. But it was exhausting, and yesterday toward the end of the training even Fuyumi-chan looked like she was about to cry, and she never cried. Keiko had considered repellent, but she was scared, and also that was not something she could use on a mission. Surely, with more time, they could get used to it. Shino at the academy had been creepy, but nothing like this. Shibi-sensei led the way, Fuyumi-chan, Ami-chan and Keiko trailed behind him as far as they could without making him stop and wait for them to catch up. He never looked back to check on them, but it was like he had a bug sense of where they were. Where they and everyone and everything was. The Hokage Tower is the other way. Ami-chan spoke up. Shibi-sensei slowed down a little. For the purposes of minimizing unnecessary traffic and greater efficiency of security, the office responsible for the assignment of D-ranked missions has been relocated to the academy building. Oh, said Ami-chan. Keiko kept her jaw clenched shut. Fuyumi-chan walked stiffly, kodachi in her hands, her eyes moving around. Under her breath she muttered curses. Keiko would not dare do that. What if she accidentally swallowed a bug? Hey, Hinata. Shino's concentration lapsed. He missed the last throw, but did not watch the shuriken's inevitable trajectory toward the bushes. He was already spinning and moving forwards. Startled by Inazuka-san's uncouth yelling in her ear, Hinata-san flinched away and overbalanced. Inazuka-san proceeded to exacerbate the situation by grabbing for her presumably in an attempt to prevent her fall. This resulted in another flinch and also in Hinata-san curling upon herself and giving up on the attempt to regain her balance. Shino considered staging an accident. Even a training accident. With the customary Aburame taciturnity, he would not even be expected to fake grief for his tragically deceased teammate. Inazuka-san stepped closer and leaned down. Geez, Hinata. Are you okay? Shino traversed the distance so fast he might as well have body flickered. He planted his feet and channeled his chakra through his body in one fluid moment together with extending his arm. His palm hit Inazuka-san's stomach. Inazuka-san himself hit a tree some 10 yards away, but Shino had not bothered to watch his trajectory any more than he had bothered with the shuriken before. He might, later, go and search for the shuriken. He would not bother searching for Inuzuka-san. A quiet gasp came from the curled-up body at his feet. Shino sank into a squat and offered his hands, palms up, like he might have approached a frightened animal. "Are you injured, Ladybug?" "Juja startled," replied Hinata-san. She sat up, her face was a picture of misery. "I am so sorry, Shino-kun. There is nothing to apologize for. I am an embarrassment. Among the members of Team 8, you are not the embarrassment," Shino announced loudly and honestly. There was some slight chance that Inuzuka-san was sufficiently concussed to break his focus on Kurenai-sensei's décolletage and allow him to interpret the insult, although Shino was not entertaining much hope. "I will try to do better," Hinata-san promised. Shino nodded. He would be pleased if she stopped overreacting and coming to unnecessary harm, and he would be ecstatic if she learned to stop putting herself down unnecessarily. Sadly, he did not know how to help her. Perhaps the Yamanaka siblings would have ideas? For the time being, however, the best he could do was give a promise in return: "You may rely upon me for anything you need." Sakura knew that sooner or later her condition would be revealed. She had been worried about her teammates' reactions, doubly so once she found out that one of her teammates would be Sasuke-kun. He just seemed so critical. But the other one was Yoshi-kun, and Sakura knew Yoshi-kun a little better than she should have, perhaps, because Ino-chan spoke of him in private often, with a mixture of exasperation and fondness, and Sakura could not imagine him being anything but kind and understanding and perhaps excited. "So," Yoshi-kun said as they waited for Kakashi-sensei, "there's polite Sakura and violent Sakura? I guess?" She cast a look to the side and upwards at Sasuke-kun, trying to gauge his reaction, but he looked on with barely a detached interest. "Ino-chan calls us cool Sakura and hot Sakura dash." She would, Yoshi-kun lamented, with the same exasperation and fondness as his sister felt for him. Sakura smiled. Inner's opinion was something that could not be repeated in polite company, but so far these reactions were not bad. Sasuke-kun nodded and then sat down onto the grass on Yoshi-kun's other side with a quiet, "So long as you only go homicidal on the enemy, that sound useful." Sakura nearly floated off of the ground, but then she had to stuff all that emotion away again, because there was some slight chance she might attempt to ravage Sasuke-kun, regardless of whether he meant that compliment as a proposition or not. Inner was way too forward for Sakura's good. Which was why she mostly stayed inside. Ino was drunk. "Don't look at me like that," she insisted, flopping over from her bed to the carpet with a thud. She didn't seem to feel any pain. A book tower toppled over, one of the books fell right on Ino's arm, and this at least deserved a glare and a quiet ow. "I can legally get drunk." "You can get reamed out by Dad," Naruto pointed out, crouching next to her. The other possibility was getting laughed at by Dad, which would probably be even worse for Ino. There was also the concern of a hangover when she had to get up for a team training tomorrow. "Drink with me," she suggested, pointing out the bottle sitting on her nightstand on top of a book. "Then we'll both get reamed out." She wasn't in too bad a state, Naruto determined. She would probably sleep it off with little to no consequences. Shinobi had strong constitutions. Also, once he checked the bottle, he found that it was the chocolate liqueur that Inoue Bie-san put into her coffee, and really not strong enough to get Ino properly plastered even if she had drunk the whole bottle, which she hadn't. Proof positive that even when she was pissed, she was smart about it. Naruto took a swig. It was too sweet for his tastes, but he might have liked it mixed with something else. "Want to tell me what drove you to early onset alcoholism?" Ino laughed. Naruto sat down by her side on the floor, both resting their backs against the bed. "Brother," she stated, "if you make Sakura normal, I will never forgive you." Then she stole the bottle from him and gulped down enough liquid sugar to glue her esophagus shut. "I'll strive to keep her functional, mainly in the interest of my continued survival, but I don't think you have a reason to worry there." Naruto fully agreed that Sakura was unique and potentially amazing, and anybody who would try to reintegrate her in some idiotic attempt to make her normal deserved to be used as practice target for Naruto's Fuinjutsu experiments. The key is not to integrate the split personality, but to strike a balance and help her keep it, so she doesn't cheerfully slaughter a clan or two on one fine night. Which seemed to be Sasuke's chief concern, very understandably. Ino reflected for a while, drank again, and then laid her head on Naruto's shoulder. Let's break Choji and Shikamaru. I want to have cool teammates too. Naruto imagined Shikakuji-san's, Yoshinobu-san's, Chozuji-san's and Mayubi-san's reaction to such an endeavor, and hoped that by morning Ino would forget the idea. Kakashi demonstrated the summoning jutsu for his team's education and, frankly, because the Ninken had been nagging at him for the past 48 hours, and he was fed up with them. He had a second date today, and while he thought that Iruka-kun would get a kick out of a complaining dog, Kakashi wasn't so pathetic that he would need to humiliate himself to keep Iruka-kun entertained, just yet. Team, he announced, this is Pakken. He's one of my summons. Pakken, this is Team 7. Team 7, huh? Hello kids. There was sudden silence as the pug padded closer to the trio of children standing at a passable semblance of parade rest. Kakashi, is that Dash? Yes. Holy dog do on a dango stick, Pakken concluded. Yes, Kakashi agreed cheerfully. I thought he was Dash. Yes. Huh, what do you know? The Ninken turned to the blonde boy. Hi, and Dash. Yoshi! Exclaimed the boy, punching one fist in the air. Yamanaka Yoshi. Yamanaka, huh? Pakken held on for a moment and then dissolved into laughter, just short of rolling on the floor. Yoshi-kun's initial friendly smile widened into something far less friendly, and he raised his hands to form a seal. Shintenshin no Jutsu. Pakken stopped laughing. Yoshi slumped but did not fall because Sakura was right there, holding him up. Good catch, Kakashi praised. He had not expected that sort of reflexes from the kunoichi. Sakura shrugged. Ino-chan trained me. In hindsight, she might have expected that Yoshi-kun and I would be assigned to the same team. By now, catching Yamanaka is instinctive to me. While she was explaining, Yoshi figured out how to use 4 legs. Pakken's body turned around, clumsily hopped onto the railing of the bridge, and jumped off in the opposite direction. Just before the splash sounded, Yoshi straightened and gave Sakura a bright, grateful smile. Sasuke stood to the side, hands in his pockets, and watched how teamwork improved a shinobi's quality of life. Pakken climbed out of the brook a few yards downstream, wet, spluttering, and mad about it enough to rival any cat. He's an asshole. Kakashi nodded, smile safely hidden behind his mask. Yes. Chapter 16, Dear Sensei. Dad? Yoshi inquired from the threshold of Inoichi's office. Did you know that Kakashi-sensei knows? About the wasabi peanut thing, I mean? Inoichi nodded. He was not any less nervous about Hataki's knowledge than his son appeared to be, but he put on his confident face. I have reasons to believe that he will keep it secret. But do keep an eye on him. Yoshi smiled and nodded. I was going to do that anyway. Ibiki-san sort of went out to get some coffee, and left me alone in his office with Kakashi's latest psych eval open on his desk, so I took a hint. Inoichi leant back in his chair, still a little nervous, but not actually worried. Between Ibiki, Yoshi and Hataki's devotion to his deceased teacher's legacy keeping the man's mouth shut, the greatest danger of a leak was once again the Sandaime. And the rest of your team? Yoshi laughed. I've actually come to get you. They're downstairs. I thought you might want to check them out for yourself. Naruto liked living in a clan compound. There was family everywhere, and even if you didn't get along, you weren't nasty to one another. If you ever felt lonely, it was easy to find someone to spend time with. It was good. He was determined to share it with his teammates, because if anyone needed the warmth of being surrounded by family, it was the rest of Team 7. Sensei included. But that was an extremely difficult case, and would have to wait until such a time when Naruto didn't have his hands full with these two. Sasuke's reception by the Yamanaka clan was as cordial as Sasuke himself. Namely, not at all. But Sasuke was nonetheless issued a standing invitation, especially after Naruto pointed out that Sasuke lived alone and his lack of grace was largely due to the savageness of his upbringing, which was to say lack thereof, and no one ever harassed him, even if some people found reasons to vacate the room when he entered it. He did not come by often, and continued issuing socialization that did not directly include Naruto or, rarely, Sakura. Sakura, on the other hand, was immediately taken into the female fold, and within 3 weeks of team assignments had been semi-adopted by Tomomi Bie-san, who decided to take advantage of Sakura's amazing control, not limited to chakra, and start her on studying medical ninjutsu. "It is not the team I would have wanted for you," said Dad, observing the interactions from the armchair in the corner, "but it's not at all bad. You will have to keep a close eye on them both." He paused to reconsider. "All three of them, that is." "Sasuke hasn't given up on his goals," Naruto admitted. "But now he understands the ramifications, and has the ability to take a step back and look at his decisions a little more objectively. It makes him about 100 times more dangerous than he was before, because he used to be a bomb waiting to go off uncontrollably at any time, and now he's more like a poison Senbon. You won't see or hear him coming, he'll strike precisely where he needs to, and make sure his target dies. Then make damn sure you're never his target, you or anyone in this family." Dad's eyes were cold and dangerous, and for once he looked enough like the former head of the department that it made Naruto shiver. "I'd kill him first," Naruto promised. And meant it. But he trusted his skills, so he was sure that that situation would never come to pass. Out of sight of authorities, Sakura unexpectedly turned out to be a lot of fun. "Did you really ride the Nara, dear?" she asked with bated breath after Naruto described what little he remembered of Team 10 Saturday meetings when they were little kids, as an aside over the course of planning strategies for their own team building. Yoshi grinned at the memory, and suppressed the twinge of melancholia that rose when he remembered that he had not been to the Nara compound in years. "Yes. When we were, maybe 5. Then we grew, and it's not worth the risk that they would get hurt." He had still visited, on non-Saturdays, and he was friends with a lot of the deer, but it didn't feel right to return after Shikamaru got so angry with him. So he had just stopped going. He saw Shikakuji-san and Yoshinobu-san once in a while, at home or at the Akimichis. He wasn't sad. Exactly. Alright, maybe he missed it a little, or a lot. Never mind though, they were talking about fun stuff to do with your friends. "Fun. Yash." "Oh," said Sakura, reacting to his shifting mood. Naruto grinned to reassure her. "If you want to, we could get you horse riding lessons," he suggested. Horse riding sounded interesting. And horses were so beautiful. "No," Sakura refused vehemently, shaking her head. "Animals don't like me. I think they can tell." She wriggled her fingers around her temple to indicate what the animals could tell. "What was it like?" "Great." Naruto grinned. "I fell off and broke my wrist, and the stag refused to let me get back on. He made me walk out of the forest on my own 2 feet, even though the wrist was all healed by the time we came back." Ino laughed at me. Shikamaru, he felt another twinge of melancholia and suppressed this one, too. He was all worried and panicky. "Have you ever met his mom?" He was like her in a little boy version. Sakura automatically leaned into his side, as if her mind just decided to substitute him for Ino. Naruto had zero compunctions about taking advantage of this. "Once. Ino-chan introduced us. She gave us a sort of a lesson on how kunoichi were different from civilian girls. But it was all very professional. I wouldn't say I know her." She's, Naruto sniggered. Imagine Shikamaru with his hair down, being energetic and cheerful, and a little shouty, and drinking a lot of alcohol. Energetic Shikamaru, Sakura repeated, wide-eyed and incredulous. I don't think I can imagine that. It's okay. I'll introduce you to her one day, proper like Naruto promised. That was something that needed to happen, but only after he had Sakura read and could predict her better. Don't break my brain any more than it already is broken, Yamanaka. She pouted, and the calculating look in her eyes was all violent. Sakura. I think your brain is amazing, and you would make half of our clan want to tear their hair out, because the Shintenshin just does not work on you. The change was not overt, but when she next spoke, she was clearly polite. Sakura again. Thank you, Yoshi-kun. Naruto liked her bunches more than he had expected to. A lot of fun, indeed. It wouldn't be nearly as hard as he had worried to get Sasuke to accept her either. Keiko was ready to drop from exhaustion, and her teammates didn't look any better. They had been apprehensive about Team 3 from the start, but Keiko knew for a fact, because they had all moaned about it, that it never occurred to them to worry about the thing that tripped them up so badly. Keiko didn't even really use to mind bugs. They just were there. If one got on her nerves, she killed it. What was the big issue? And now, bugs were the single biggest problem in her life. Hi, Keiko-chan, Ami-chan, Fuyumi-chan. Hello, why Yoshi-kun, Ami-chan replied, mustering a smile. Keiko looked over, and even she felt a little buoyed. Her mouth twisted in an exhausted half-smile, but it really was impossible not to smile, looking at Yoshi-kun. He was like a ray of sunshine. Are you okay? He asked, worriedly, and it was like he projected this complete willingness to take on anybody or anything for them. This was why Keiko had always liked him so much better than she liked Sasuke-kun, even though Sasuke-kun won all the spars and acted so cool and mysterious. Ami-chan pulled out a handkerchief and blew her nose. Fuyumi-chan patted her shoulder, doubly tired from training and of their friends' tears, and muttered, Ami-chan, stop crying please. I can't help it. You've been crying for days now, and it's getting a little old. Aside from everything else, she had to have a horrible dehydration headache. What's the problem? Asked Yoshi-kun, sitting down next to them on the park bench. Maybe I can help? Or ask Dad. It's our team, Yoshi-kun, admitted Keiko. But Ami-chan's being a little dramatic. I mean, Shibi-sensei did pass us and dash. Bugs. Wailed Ami. Bugs everywhere. Keiko clenched her jaw for a moment and then said with unshakable determination, we're tough kunoichi dash. Hey, Ami-chan? Yoshi-kun slowly, carefully put his arm around Ami-chan's shoulders, and Keiko wished for a moment she were a crybaby too, because she was so jealous. I think, one thing that's always helped me stop being scared or, grossed out by stuff, was finding out more about it. There's this plant that's all sticky and super gross and, eats flies, and when you understand how it all works, it becomes sort of neat. Even if it stinks, you know why. And you can get sort of weirdly fond even of the stuff that you previously thought was horrible. Something that ate flies did not sound horrible at all. In fact, Keiko wished to have one. She would have to stop by the Yamanaka's flower shop on her way home. Fuyumi-chan was thinking the exact same thing, Keiko was sure, they could both tell just by looking at one another. So, we should study bugs? Ami-chan inquired, breath hitching, although this time it was probably due to Yoshi-kun's closeness. He smiled again, it did terrible things to Keiko's stomach. Yeah. It's worth a try, isn't it? Will that stop making me feel like they're crawling all over me? Keiko asked, not at all because she wished to have that smile redirected at her. Fuyumi-chan shuddered. I think we'll stop feeling like they're crawling all over us when they stop crawling all over us. Ino guessed she should not have been surprised to find Inuzuka on the doorstep of their house. Between the two of them, she and her brother had already collected all the other genin of their class. Inuzuka was probably feeling left out. Man, he said instead of a hello, how can you stand this? All those flowers make my nose itch like hell and dash. His dog sneezed. Ino moved to close the door. I need your help. Ino shut the door with a satisfying bang. It's about Hinata. Inuzuka yelled from outside, interspersed with pitiful barking. You care about Hinata, right? Come on, Ino. Ino did care about Hinata-chan, and so did Yoshi, who turned up to investigate what all that barking was about, and that was how Inuzuka ended up sitting on the floor of their living room, eating wasabi peanuts by the handful and trying, badly, to explain what the issue was. Mainly, it seemed, the issue was the entire rest of the Team 8. In between complaints about fleas or threats of fleas, and a random accosting on the street by a little girl with Hyuga eyes, who had apparently kicked Inuzuka somewhere unmentionable without saying a single word to him, it did actually sort of sound like Dog Brain's teammates were bullying him. But Ino maintained that he deserved it, since his latest complaint was, and Kurenai-sensei's dress is amazing. She's so pretty. Akamaru made a disparaging sound. What would you know? Dog Brain snapped at the dog. But I get kind of, around her, and she thinks I'm a weirdo. Ino exchanged a look with her brother. Yoshi made a sympathetic grimace, turning back to the Inuzuka. Look, Kiba, I don't know how to tell you this, but dash. Yeah, I am a weirdo, haha, you're making fun of me. You try concentrating with such a total babe playing the strict sensei dash. I've got things to do, Ino announced and moved to leave. Wait. Sorry, Ino, look, he took a deep breath, clenched his fists at his sides and tried, as hard as such a little horndog's mind could, to be serious. You two are friends with Shino and Hinata, right? Ino put her hand on her cocked hip and raised her eyebrows. How do you talk to them? I think, Yoshi said, the question you want to ask is how do we get them to talk to us? That too. They're so weird. Yoshi suggested so innocently that Inuzuka almost fell for it. Yo, piss off. No, wait, don't. Look, guys, they're my teammates, and I thought this would be easy cause Shino never talks, just goes along with everything, and Hinata is strong and smart, and I'm me. But it's all gone wrong. Because Shino-kun doesn't go along with everything and Hinata-chan is shy? Yoshi guessed. Ino found the use of the word shy almost humorous in its inadequacy, but chances were that Dog Brain wouldn't have understood anything more complicated anyway. And they're already friends, Inuzuka added, and they don't like me. Because you shout, try to order them around, harass Hinata-chan and leer at your sensei a lot? Ino suggested. What? Inuzuka exclaimed. No. I don't, his voice trailed off and he sculled, realizing that he was shouting. And quite possibly that Ino was correct on all the other accounts as well. Guys, how do I get them to talk to me? Ino? Asked Yoshi. She shook her head. You're better at this. I'll be the hot sensei. Come on, Dog Brain, we're giving you a crash course on acting like a decent fucking person. And your dog can come too, as long as he sits quietly. Understood? Akamaru looked up at her, tucked his tail between his legs and nodded. Inoichi dragged himself home, feeling dead on his feet. Finding 3 children in his living room instead of the usual 2 wasn't exactly unexpected. They were sociable like the wind country was balmy, but the identities confused him. Eyes up here. Snapped Ino, who was wearing what Inoichi dearly hoped was just a henge. There was no way she could have acquired Enko's body type since yesterday, right? Sorry, sensei. Cried the boy. Sum's son, obviously, although Inoichi had never seen the Inuzuka clan head cry, so the resemblance seemed to be limited to physical appearance. Also, there was a little white dog cowering under the coffee table and whining very softly. Hyuga-chan flinched away when the boy raised his voice. P please, Kiba Keiko and dash. Oh shit Hinata. I didn't mean to scare you. He paused and threw his hands up. I'm never going to get this. You're just not trying hard enough. Ino yelled back. Inoichi interrupted his chakra flow to prevent the image of jiggling from being seared into his retinas, while Hyuga-chan trembled, tried to become one with the sofa, and still kept flinching at every loud noise. "What is going on here?" Inoichi demanded. His daughter, who at this point had Inuzuka in a headlock, looked up and grinned. There was blood on her hands, but it seemed to be related to her illusionary bust and the Inuzuka boy's sudden proximity to it, rather than an actual broken nose. Hyuga-chan also looked up and grinned. "Hi, Dad. We're doing intense friendship therapy." Inoichi stared at the girl whom he had barely ever seen smile, and that was out of obligation and politeness, grinning at him very widely. And oh dear Izanagi, why hadn't the Kai dispelled this too? After Ino's through with him, the cheerful Hyuga-chan continued, "I'll teach him about porn and taking care of it himself." Inoichi mechanically raised his hand to ward off the evil and announced, "This never happened. I'm not here. I'm at the Nara compound, getting drunk." And because the best lies were those with some measure of truth in them, he turned on his heel, and went to make this a very, very good lie. Kiba-kun was acting oddly. He was pale and nervous, and several times he had started saying something only to stop himself a moment later. Hinata was worried, but if she asked him about it, he would have invaded her personal space again, and she preferred it when he was standing at least on the other side from Shino-kun. Shino-kun was conscientious about respecting her personal space. He, too, preferred his own uninvaded, but he dealt so much better than she did when his space was disrespected. "You have noticed as well," Shino-kun said quietly while Kurenai-sensei picked one from the available D-rank missions. Hinata cast a nervous look sideways at Kiba-kun and nodded. "I believe it is prudent to investigate," suggested Shino-kun. "Why?" "Because our teammate is volatile even without unknown additional concerns." Hinata nodded again. Kiba-kun did not seem ill. A quick Byakugan check confirmed that there was no jutsu affecting him, and there was nothing wrong with his chakra. They would have to ask. Hinata could not make herself do it. "Would you prefer dash? Please?" She pushed her fingers together. Shino-kun is less likely to be accosted. Hinata understood intellectually that Kiba-kun liked her, but his manner of being friendly required excessive tactility, and thus was extremely uncomfortable for her. "I will cover Shino-kun, in case Akamaru-kun redirects his violent impulses." "Inuzuka-san," Shino-kun spoke with truly unnecessary amount of passive aggression, "have you displeased your Ninken?" Kiba-kun stared down at his calf. Akamaru-kun had bitten him every time that morning when Kiba-kun tried to speak. Akamaru-kun whuffed at Hinata and with his paw nudged the bruise he had given Kiba-kun as a reminder. Kiba-kun cleared his throat and spoke so quietly that Hinata had to strain her ears. "Akamaru believes Ino is watching us. I think she is team training, but I'm not willing to risk it." Akamaru-kun nodded. "That does not explain why he bites you," Shino-kun pointed out, tilting his head to the side. "Ino-chan," Hinata whispered. Shino-kun nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense." "Why?" "Because if the Yamanaka decide to re-educate you, only defecting from the village carries a slight chance of escaping your fate." Hinata had to bite her cheek to stifle a giggle. "I got us something Kiba-kun will enjoy," Kurenai-sensei announced, smiling and waving a mission assignment scroll. "We'll be catching Tora, the fire daimyo's wife's cat dash." Kiba-kun and Akamaru-kun whined in unison. Then Kiba-kun leapt, snatched the scroll from Kurenai-sensei's hand in midair and ran away, calling over his shoulder, "I've got this one, just take the day off or something." Kurenai-sensei sighed. "Just when I thought that boy could not become more of a headache." Oh well, at least he stopped drooling. Irika hadn't been explicitly instructed to date Hatake Kakashi, although it was implied. Ibiki-san did not actually want Irika to date Kakashi, and had made his reasons clear enough while skirting around the issue of village secrets and the ANBU itself. Irika definitely had the maneuvering space to keep his acquaintance with Hatake friendly. The option was gone after their fourth date, because at some point during the evening Irika had decided that he wanted to have sex with the man, and was going to take what was on offer here. He wished there had been alcohol involved, so he would have something, anything, but himself to blame. Now the sun was rising, and he had just woken up next to a cold dent in his mattress, and wondered if he had just failed the mission. If this had been what Hitaki was after, he would have no reason to come back. And Irika would have to report this all to Ibiki-san. With enough details included that he would not be able to look the man in the eye for the next 10 years. A harried ninja fell through the door in a panicked state. Hiruzen looked up from the paperwork and braced himself for the bad news. Was something on fire? Guys in Kakashi's latest competition grew destructive? Did someone piss of Tsum? Sandame-sama. The poor man wailed. Hiruzen sighed. What is the matter, Keiji-kun? It's Hitaki Kakashi. Apparently Hiruzen wasn't far off with his guesses. It did pay to know the most likely sources of trouble in one's village, and after his students, Kushina-chan, the Uchiha and Danzo, ceased occupying the top positions, the standards for trouble lowered somewhat. Which he appreciated in his advanced age. And speaking of advanced age, it was what he blamed for not immediately remembering that Keiji-kun was the latest in the long line of long-suffering therapists assigned to Kakashi-kun's case. Keiji stared at the world through his askew glasses, as though he wasn't recognizing it, sported a disarrayed hairstyle possibly owing to a Raiten technique, and wore a lightly smoking coat, looking as though he had just returned from a battlefield. Sandame-sama, he spoke softly, he seems relatively stable. Hiruzen did not let his jaw fall, since that would have made it seem as though he didn't actually know everything that happened in Konoha. Instead, he put on his omniscient expression and steepled his fingers in front of himself. Well, how about that? Chapter 17, First Contact. Chapter text. Inoichi followed the booming sound to the location of its source, and wished he could have been surprised to see his children and assorted cohorts congregated around a huge crater where a few training posts used to stand. The smell of melted clay hung heavy in the air, and this was probably going to take more than a couple of mid-level Doton Jutsu to sort out. What is going on here? He demanded, wishing he could go and get drunk with Yoshino again, instead of investigating. Training, Daddy. Ino chirped, fluttering around her tame Hyuga this way and that, so that she eventually ended up bodily shielding her from Inoichi's potential wrath. She transformed her face from innocently enthusiastic to overwrought within a blink of an eye. Daddy, did you know that there's a dangerous international criminal after Sasuke-kun? Sasuke-kun is so brave. She looked about ready to act out a whole love-struck rant, so Inoichi flicked a hand at her. She shrugged and shrank into the background, pulling Hyuga-chan with her. Opined Uchiha-kun, but did it so quietly that Inoichi could plausibly pretend to not have noticed. Son, you want to tell me something? Yoshi spread his hands. They looked pinkish, his sleeves were completely scorched off, and had Inoichi not known about the healing factor provided by you-know-what, he might have had a mild fit of panic at the possible injuries. Dad, remember how when I was littler you had me training with Hideyoshi-san? He turned to the crouched and scowling Uchiha next to him to explain in stage whisper, that's the guy I told you about. The one that divorced Tomomi Bie-san cause she seduced his secret male lover away from him in revenge for him cheating on her, or something. Inoichi pressed his palm over his eyes. That was not what had happened there, at all. At least, not really. Also, it wasn't the point. Yoshi was good at dissembling. Good enough that one day soon Inoichi might have to start worrying. Yes, Yoshi, I do remember when I asked Hideyoshi to train you, he announced loudly. Ino, somewhere off to the left, was practically crooning to the Hyuga to keep her calm. Inoichi was tempted to retroactively fail her on her final project, but then decided that if Hyuga-chan's Jounin-sensei found her acceptable, he had no leg to stand on. So, Yoshi said, nodding to emphasize his point, Hideyoshi-san trained me. For a while. About how to make seals. The basic ones, anyway. storage and stunning, and maybe a teeny tiny explosive ones. And then he sorta might have found a new lover and not have much time for me, so he turned up in the middle of one night, dumped his entire library on Fuinjutsu on the floor of my room and left. And I never saw him again. I think he left the village. Inoichi stared. He wished he had kept his eyes covered. There was a certain humiliation to being looked at judgmentally by a 13-year-old Uchiha boy that barely passed for sane on a good day. Continue, he pressed through his teeth. Was Ino no, there was no kissing happening. Just whispering. And excessive touching. But Ino was a kunoichi well versed in conversion techniques, so Inoichi bit his tongue and focused on his son instead, no matter how much he yearned to kill something. So, Yoshi drawled, I studied a bit on my own. It wasn't as boring as the academy textbooks, and if I switched the covers the teachers never noticed. And that lead to your tectonic efforts, how? Inoichi inquired, dramatically looking over the crater. Yoshi could have read Ika Ika at the academy and, as long as he hadn't gotten caught, Inoichi was fine with it. What was the point of sheltering the children? They would find out about these things soon enough, and it was better that they be forewarned. Sasuke-kun and I got talking, Yoshi said, touching the Uchiha's shoulder. The contact resulted in a flinch, but wasn't immediately rejected, which Inoichi recognized as the miracle it was, and started thinking of a more viable plan of dealing with that man. Inoichi nodded to confirm that he followed. I suggested that if that was an actual danger, Sasuke-kun should have a reliable way of extraction, but he's the kill em or die trying kind dash. The Uchiha sent Yoshi a glare that smoldered more than the crater behind them. So, we're working on a seal that can be slapped on the enemy mid-fight. Which does, what? Inoichi was intrigued, and also retroactively terrified. How had he not known that his son was self-studying seals after his tutor had done a runner? Dad, you know the hypothermia cell at the department? Inoichi didn't like hearing his child refer to the torture and interrogation so familiarly, the department, indeed, but he nodded anyway, because he only had himself to blame, and he was well familiar with the mentioned room. It was kept at -5 degrees Celsius, and everything inside was made of steel, including the steel-plated door. Inmates were scarcely ever allowed such luxuries as access to their chakra or shoes. Reverse summoning? He guessed. Yoshi nodded, proud of his old man figuring it out after he had been led to the conclusion step by step. And Inoichi did not like that Uchiha had, honest to Izanagi, smiled. It only took a few weeks for Sakura to realize that she liked being honest. By which she meant that she liked dispensing with the illusion of politeness, using words that made people turn chalky or purple in offense, and speaking her mind. It helped, or alternatively did not help, depending on whom you asked, that Yoshi shamelessly encouraged her. Sometimes Sakura suspected that Yoshi was even worse than Ino-chan, but was better at playing nice. Just admit it, Sakura grumbled at her blonde teammate after yet another of their schemes fell through. The door in front of them stood unmarked, like it was mocking all their efforts. We can't prank Kakashi-sensei if we can't get inside his apartment. Yoshi looked at her with exaggerated pity. Oh, ye of little faith. Prove it, then, Sakura challenged. They weren't getting inside that apartment today, but with additional motivation Yoshi might actually be able to find a way and, well, Sakura really wanted to make Kakashi-sensei's life uncomfortable. Doubly so since Ino-chan clued her in that Kakashi was dating Irika-sensei, which, why would Irika-sensei? He could do so much better. But anyway, at least that meant that Kakashi's apartment was unguarded for the length of a date about twice a week. Sakura was content to sacrifice Irika-sensei for a window of opportunity. Cheapskate, complained Yoshi. Would you bet I can't do it? Sakura scoffed. No. I've seen what you did to Sasuke. Took that, lethally pretty lump of coal and worked at it until first glints of diamond began to surface. So motherfucking shiny. Inner wanted to lick it. HN opined Sasuke, but it was a weak defense. He was here, after all, participating in a non-mandated, unsanctioned, in fact, team activity, simply because Yoshi made the eyes at him and suggested that waging a psychological war on their Jounin-sensei would be good training for future confrontation with Sasuke's brother. It was a solid argument, sure. Sakura just hadn't expected Sasuke to fall for it. But looking at him now, he probably wasn't here because Yoshi had persuaded him. He was here because he wanted to be here, and Yoshi gave him a valid-sounding excuse. He's grateful, Sakura told Yoshi, glad that she had known Ino-chan well enough to not be surprised by the depth of Yamanaka deviousness. HN. Sakura grinned. Appreciative too. HRN, Sasuke emphasized, with a hint of a frustrated growl in the sound. Sakura fluttered her lashes at him, the way the polite self sometimes would. My name actually contains vowels, too. But that was a good effort. I wonder why I never realized you were calling out to me whenever you said HN, just having trouble articulating dash. Sasuke launched himself at her, right there in the corridor of Kakashi-sensei's building. Sakura used Yoshi to propel herself out of the way of the strike and punched Sasuke in the side of the head. Polite her whined inside her head, but Sasuke had a thick skull, he could take it. Chances were he might even respect her a little bit. Oh dear, drawled Yoshi with patently fake sympathy, Sakura-chan, just so you are aware, boys don't find emasculating attractive. Sakura snorted. I don't find incompetent attractive. They both watched as Sasuke gingerly sat up, braced himself with his hands and squinted around, apparently waiting for the world to stop spinning like crazy. Sasuke-kun's not incompetent, Yoshi chided. And you were a member of his fan club. Sakura shrugged. So were you. Just technically. Also, I was just in it to de-brainwash him. Mikami was just in it so that your sister would pull us through the academy, Sakura admitted. Not that she didn't think Sasuke would make a damn good husband one day, with all the money and the clan name and the political influence and the really fucking pretty face. Good genes. Yoshi was grinning at her even as he offered Sasuke a hand to pull him up from the floor. This calls for a toast. Lemonade, anyone? I'll pay. Sure. Sasuke-kun? Sakura asked in that sweet voice that made old ladies and shopkeepers of any age smile at her. Sasuke let Yoshi keep an arm around his ribs, because he wasn't stupid enough, anymore, to insist he could walk on his own with a concussion. You were more tolerable before you let your true personality out in public. Right back at you, Sasuke-kun, Sakura assured him. Ino, I love my team. Ino was going to kill her brother. She was going to tie him up with ninja wire, bleed him a little until he begged for mercy, and then she would slit his throat, smiling serenely all the while, because she was going to suffer a psychotic break, and as they all learned from Uchiha Itachi, the best psychopaths started with their own clan. Granted, Itachi had left his brother for last, so maybe Ino would tie up Yoshi with ninja wire, then let him watch as she killed everybody else and then. Shut up before I get you. I fucking hate my team dash. Dad's going to kill whoever's fouling up your language, Yoshi cut her off before she could get creative. Still, you've got to hear what happened today while Kakashi-sensei dash. If it was exciting, I'll split your stomach open and dash. You'll try, you mean dash. Let your intestines spill out and not even care about my carpet, because I spent today in a state of mind-numbing stupor. Choji 8. Shikamaru and Asuma played shogi instead of Go. That was all that happened. There it was. Out. Ino already felt a tiny bit lighter. Yoshi stared at her with a genuinely appalled expression. That made her feel a little bit better too. At least he wasn't laughing at her. You poor thing. Want to go a few rounds? Yes. Ino leapt to her feet and threw her book onto the sofa, where it sadly flapped over and landed wrong on half of its pages. Or I'll kill someone for real. Yoshi clapped her shoulder hard enough to almost knock her into the table. Let's go spar. The door to the shop opened 2 minutes before closing time. It was actually Taime's shift, but Taimei was off having a secret rendezvous with a half-dressed special jounin who was, apparently, special in many ways, so Naruto was left to man the counter. He didn't mind. A major favor was definitely worth it, and he could spend the time crunching through Senju Tobarama's monograph. It had never been published, there were only handful copies of it, and this one had been lent to Naruto by Sandaime-sama himself after Naruto had asked him about how he had stayed awake writing that super boring philosophy book, a question which, incidentally, the Hokage had not answered, although Naruto personally suspected that it had to do with chemical substances. Tobarama-sensei's monograph was called Yes, People Really Are That Stupid, and only got better from there. Naruto was already determined to copy it, even if he had to rewrite it word for word by hand. He was reading the chapter titled Yes, Even Ninja Are That Stupid and realizing that this wasn't an actual book, some arsehole had swiped Naidame-sama's diary. The author had been filtering his stress rather than writing a manual. A customer entered. Parting from the book was painful. But then Naruto looked up, and there was Hinata-chan, looking like she had gone 3 rounds against a bear, and then gotten whisper-shouted at by her dick of a father in front of her peers. Yes, that had happened at the academy, and Ino had helped Naruto set up a prank that involved a lot of fertilizers and resulted in an explosion that claimed half the length of the bastard's hair. It looked like it was time for another prank. Hinata-chan's shoulders were hunched, her head bowed, and what little remained visible of her hands in the overlong sleeves was swathed in bandages. Hinata-chan. He was on his feet before she even forced herself to look up. She flinched at his sudden movement, but when he slowed down and approached her more carefully, she let him draw her into a half-hug. "Do you want Ino? We can definitely find Ino for you dash." "Yes please," she breathed almost soundlessly. Naruto decided that shouting for his sister, loud noises in general, was a terrible idea, and steered Hinata-chan toward the back door of the store that led to the garden, along the engawa, and into the kitchen. Ino was, of course, in her room, so they had to trudge all the way upstairs, hoping no one would come in and rob the shop while he was babysitting. Closing time came, and went just as he hammered on his sister's door with his fist. She ripped the door open with a snarled "what dash" and then spotted Hinata. "Oh, my Izanagi-sama!" She cried out, pulled Hinata inside and slammed the door shut in front of Naruto's nose. "You're welcome," he said to the empty corridor, and went back downstairs to lock up the shop and continue his reading. "An A rank?" Ino-chan exclaimed, incredulous. "No, not incredulous," Hinata reminded herself. Ino-chan believed her. It was odd. Perhaps stunned or surprised, that did not automatically imply doubting Hinata's words. She recited the reasoning to herself and felt a little better. Also, Ino-chan was warm against her side, and she did not even so much as imply that Hinata was making anything up. Yes, Hinata confirmed, feeling a little buoyed by her friend's attention and faith. "Well, at first a B rank when we encountered 2 C-class shinobi. They were hidden inside a genjutsu and, it's not bragging if it's true," Hinata reminded herself, "just speak plainly. I saw them. I alerted Kurenai-sensei. She let Kiba-kun and Shino-kun fight, and they won easily. Kurenai-sensei determined that Tazuna-san was lying, and suggested that we discontinue the mission, as good faith was broken on the client's side. But you didn't," Ino-chan said, certain of teammates' bravery. Hinata blushed. She wished Ino-chan would stroke her hair, that always calmed her down, but did not know how to ask. Kurenai-sensei put it to a vote. Kiba-kun wished to continue with the mission and Shino-kun agreed. I think. You think? Ino-chan pulled her in a little tighter. Hinata sighed. She briefly closed her eyes. But there was a story to tell, and she made herself get on with it. "I think Shino-kun should be a chunin. He is strong and smart, and he is a good leader when Kurenai-sensei is not available, even though Kiba-kun does not like to take his orders." The truth was that Kiba-kun needed to be a leader, and something inside him hulled when Shino-kun put him in his place. "That sounds like Kiba," Ino-chan agreed. Her knuckles moved up and down over Hinata's shoulder blade, digging in a little too hard. Kiba-kun is strong. But he's a little hot-headed. He charges in before he thinks things through. MHM. So, what happened to push your mission up to A rank? Hinata gathered her courage and leaned into Ino-chan, half burying her face in Ino-chan's shoulder. There was another missing nin. Momochi Zabuza. He was probably A-class. He had this jutsu when he made mist rise and used his hearing to locate his targets unseen and kill them. Ino-chan laughed. Mist? Against you? Oh, Hinata-chan, did you dismember him? Hinata's blush worsened. She felt like her face was on fire. Kurenai-sensei put him in a Jinjutsu. One of the auditory ones. So, he thought that we were in different places than we really were, and when he attacked, he hit a tree. Hinata took several deep breaths, and paused a bit before releasing each of them. Once she felt like she could speak without mumbling again, she admitted, I closed several of his tenketsu. The one over the throat too. The one that stops you breathing. Then Kurenai-sensei killed him. Ino-chan pulled away, but before Hinata could truly despair at the loss she exclaimed, You are so awesome. Hinata-chan, that's fantastic. You helped your sensei bring down an A-class ninja. Hinata pressed her hand over her mouth. Just stay calm. Stay calm, she told herself. It's okay. It's Ino-chan, and she believes you, and she won't say anything mean. Zabuza-san had an apprentice too. Kurenai-sensei said he was a B-class, but before he could attack, Shino-kun's Kakechu had already drained most of his chakra. So, you protected the drunk and battled scary missing nin and collected the rewards? Ino-chan paraphrased, smiling like she was proud. The reward money is property of the clan, Hinata explained. But yes. We did all of that. Well, that's not fair, grumbled Ino-chan. Does that mean you can't go out tonight and spend your well-earned cash on great food and an even greater dessert? Hinata shrank. I don't need dash. Nonsense. Ino-chan jumped to her feet and offered her hand. Let's go. My treat. Because you've done so great, and you totally deserve to be treated like the great kunoichi you've proven yourself to be. Hinata feared she might catch on fire. But like always, she followed Ino-chan without a care for where Ino-chan would lead her. You need to cut her loose, Shikamaru proclaimed, as though he had any say in anything about Ino's life. His hand moved mechanically up and down, even though there was no paint left on his brush. That fence was doomed. This coming from you? Ino snapped. Her part of that damn fence was going to be perfect. Shikamaru faced her head on, letting the brush plop into the bucket and, disappear entirely under the surface of the paint. Shikamaru so rarely bothered to make eye contact that at this moment Ino's attention snapped to him and remained on him. I know what I'm talking about. Ino blinked. A few past events rearranged themselves in her head, and while Shikamaru was still mostly incomprehensible, she began to fathom the reasoning behind some of his more dubious choices. It had never made sense to her why Shikamaru would have cut Yoshi out of his life, but he was as good as drawing a parallel here. My brother never needed you, she pointed out. Because it was true. Yoshi hadn't needed Shikamaru. Yoshi had liked him and cared for him and respected his opinions, but there was nothing nearly as powerful and dangerous between them as Hinata-chan's dependence on Ino. Shikamaru shrugged. Yoshi's better, stronger, than he would have been if we had stayed that close. Ino opened her mouth to argue, and then closed it. Because Shikamaru, damn him, was right. After the ditching, Yoshi had gone through the annoying crying phase, and emerged on the other side a little more jaded. He and Ino grew closer, learned to work together, and since then they were always better together than apart. If Ino had a problem, Yoshi was the first person she would ask for advice or help. If Yoshi had a problem, he came to Ino. You bastard, she hissed, turning away to him under the pretense on focusing on the objective of their D-rank mission. Their parents had tried to strengthen the ties of the Ino Shikacho team by excluding Yoshi from Saturdays. Fair enough. But it was actually Shikamaru's arseholeness that had managed to enforce any kind of closeness between anyone, and it was between Ino and Yoshi, who were never ever going to be partnered together in the field, because their skills had almost 75% overlap. You're such a fucking sap, she grumbled. Shikamaru just shrugged, untouched by the accusation. If you care about Hyuga, make her stand on her own 2 feet. Ino dipped her brush in the paint and straightened, feeling the first stirrings of pain in her lower back. Shikamaru didn't know everything, and he hadn't had the same training Ino had. Maybe she should have failed her project. Maybe. But she didn't think so. Most of the Sanish ninja in service had something or someone they depended on for the motivation to crawl out of their bed, or futon, or sleeping bag, in the morning, and that was a perfectly acceptable coping mechanism. Hinata-chan had the trauma of a ninja 3 times her age, because she was high-functioning autistic, and her clan head had tried to beat it out of her. It was bullshit. She was a little too empathetic, sure, that was a handicap, but she could work around it, if somebody took the time to guide her and let her develop her tools. And, aside from the emotional fragility, she was an enemy's nightmare in the field. Fast as lightning, precise as a surgeon and able to see through appearances to what was really there. Basically, Hyuga Hayashi was a narrow-minded idiot, Shikamaru was an overconfident busybody, and Ino was right. Inu, Yoshi whined, stretching decadently on the sofa. I want to make out with Naidame-sama's mind. Ino laughed so hard she had to stop reading for a moment, reflexively marking her page with her middle finger. I think you just joined a very large club, brother. Are you okay, Ino? Choji asked quietly, while Ino rewrapped her hands in preparation of another taijutsu assault on the training post. Somewhere on the edge of the training ground, in the shadow of a tree, Asuma-sensei and Shikamaru slept around a half-set shogi board. Apparently, getting back from their first C-rank yesterday meant that today was for resting. Yoshi and Sakura are on a mission, and I've got no one to spar with, Ino hissed. Unless you're volunteering. Choji cringed. Can't we, practice throwing instead? Ino needed to hit something. Throwing did not work as a substitute. And if Choji was too chicken shit, he could go and join the sleeping pile of uselessness. Hey Shino-kun, said Yoshi-san, casually sitting down on the other side of the table. How's things? Shino decided not to let Yoshi-san's force of personality and lack of respect for other people's privacy disconcert him. He knew that Ladybug had gone to the Yamanaka for comfort, and under the circumstances Yoshi-san's concern might have been warranted. Teammate has recovered well, Shino assured him. One unexpected positive consequence of the disastrous mission was conciliation with Inuzuka-san. They still had a long way to go, but now the grounds on which future cooperation might be built were established. That's good. Yoshi-san smiled, but despite his effort to appear contented, his exhaustion was apparent. He had not ordered any food, either. He seemed to have simply sat down to gather the strength to continue on the next part of his trip. The walk from here to the Yamanaka flowers took a couple of minutes, in civilian terms. Are you well? Shino asked, putting down his chopsticks. This was a new experience. He did not think he had ever before been concerned for Yoshi-san. Yoshi-san's smile intensified. You're so nice, Shino-kun. I'm fine, thanks for asking. Just tired. See, our mission didn't get bumped up to A rank, but on our way back we walked through an ANBU mission that spilled from grass into fire, and I've kinda been running for a day straight. And carrying Sakura part of the way, after she dropped of chakra exhaustion, while Sasuke scouted and Kakashi defended flank, and we still got paid for just a C rank. It's like the worst of both worlds. He laughed. Shino realized that he was seeing more of Yoshi-san's true personality than he ever had seen before. He felt privileged for the trust extended to him. Nah, you won't tell anyone I mentioned seeing you know whom? Asked Yoshi-san. I think that part was actually secret. Oops. I will tell no one, Shino assured him. He hastened through consuming the rest of his meal, stood, and offered his hand. Come. I shall accompany you home. The way Yoshi-san looked at him made him feel uncomfortable. He did not believe he had done anything to deserve such regard. Nonetheless, he insisted on seeing his friend safely to his family's house, if his Jounin-sensei had neglected to do so. Irika let himself into the hospital room, telling himself for the 20th time that if Kakashi didn't want him here, he could just say so and Irika would take his leave. They were dating, after all, at the very least until Kakashi told him they were not anymore. Come in, sensei, said Kakashi's voice just as Irika was pressing down the door handle. Irika stepped inside. To his surprise, Kakashi seemed uninjured, even though he was lying placidly in bed. He must have shown his bemusement, because Kakashi was moved to explain. Chakra exhaustion. The kids too. Irika had noticed Sakura and Sasuke of course, but he had been most immediately concerned with whether he would be welcome to visit while they were incapacitated. Despite being bedridden, Kakashi was still obviously in mission mode, and he would not have allowed anyone inside whom he did not trust with his students. Irika smiled. I am glad you will all be well. Yoshi-kun? Kakashi snorted. That kid is indefatigable. I think he could have carried all of us with shadow clones if I let him. I sent him home. He tilted his head to the side, and then raised an arm. Come here. Irika went, even as he felt that he was crossing some kind of line. When he had suggested that he would date Kakashi, he had not expected that Kakashi would come to genuinely trust him. He would have to think about this. I'm so glad you're back, Ino gasped, and fell into the grass to just stare up at the pretty colors of the sunset and try to catch her breath. Yoshi sat down next to her and handed her a water bottle. Attempting to drink would have been too ambitious at the moment, and she would probably puke it up, so she just poured the water over her face and hoped to absorb it by osmosis. Happy to beat you up anytime, sis, Yoshi assured her. Don't be smug. You train with Sasuke-kun. My training partner is a fucking upright log. Yeah, I think you should tell Dad, Yoshi suggested, grimacing. Or at least tell Asuma that you're going to tell Dad. I'm not sure how easy he intimidates, but if he's neglecting your training, Dad will skin him alive, and after that the point will be moot. Ino smiled at the vision of Asuma-sensei being slowly, meticulously skinned. She wanted to be like Daddy when she grew up. Maybe she should start training skinning? Oh, she should train skinning during team training, with rabbits, or maybe cats or something. That could convince the useless trio to get off their arses and avoid pissing her off. Yoshi wriggled in place. He finished drinking his own water and finally resolved to talk about what was bothering him. Kakashi-sensei hinted, and by hinted, I mean told us straightforward, that he's recommending us for the Chunin exams. I think we're getting on his delicate nerves. That man can't accept constructive criticism. He takes everything so personally. He rolled his eyes, but it was at best contrived. He seemed genuinely worried. I hope Asuma-sensei will put us forward too, Ino grumbled. You think you'll pass? Asked her brother, and he was lucky Ino was too comfortable to bother raising a hand, else he would have been digging a shuriken out of somewhere uncomfortable. Depends, she admitted. With me it'll be about luck. Shikamaru could pass blindfolded, but there's nothing in this country that could motivate him to do it. And Choji? I don't know. I'll strangle you with your small intestine if you tell him so, but he's just not there yet. Why aren't you sparring with him? He refuses. Too much of a gentleman to hit a girl, apparently. Yoshi groaned and flopped backwards to lie alongside Ino and watch the slowly darkening sky with her. That's a major weakness in the field. I know. Ino's exasperation with her team seemed to reach new and amazing heights with every passing day. How had this happened? Weren't they forced together despite class rankings because they were supposed to be the most functional team ever? This was a damn farce. So does Asuma. He claims it's the reason for at least 2 of his cigarettes a day. Ino didn't need anyone to tell her, she knew Asuma had expected to have it easy, with the ready-made team of home-trained clan heirs who knew each other since early childhood. Now he didn't know what to do, and instead of Kami forbid asking for some advice, or trying to talk to them or anything, he just went through the motions and waited for something to happen. Yoshi looked equally pissed. He's trying to emotionally extort Choji into hitting girls? Is he brain damaged? Conclusion pending. Why can't I have a good teacher, like Kurenai-sensei? Or at least a hot one like you? Yoshi rolled his eyes. I keep telling you, sister, mental illnesses are not attractive. But I agree on the other point. Why can't we have a teacher like Kurenai-sensei? Shikako for a long while watched out of the window as Shikamaru assaulted the training post. Eventually he sighed and folded himself onto their bed. That confirms your theory. His wife sat cross-legged next to him, massaging the tense muscles in the back of her neck. I had hoped for some embarrassment out of that kid, but most of the time he just seems coldly terrified. Shikako did quite strongly empathize with his child. He, too, wanted to punch something a lot. Far too aware of the realities of shinobi life. Far too damn young dash. He's your son, said Yoshino, and, because she loved him, it was an explanation rather than an accusation. Not just mine. He put his arm around her and buried his face in her hair. Before you, I never had so much to lose that I would know that special kind of terror. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.